The Packers want revenge against the Philadelphia Eagles, while the Eagles want to keep atop the NFC. It is a revenge game, a grudge match, a primetime showdown. We got a crossover Thursday. Locked on Packers, Locked on Eagles. Let's go.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome inside another crossover Thursday. It's Locked on Packers, Locked on Eagles, a prime time showdown. I'm Peter Bukowski, host of Locked on Packers. Louie DiBiase from Locked on Eagles joins me. And Lou, I feel like we've done a million of these because we got to do a couple last year. Maybe we'll get to do a couple this year. Who knows? And for Philly, you know, these are kind of two teams a little bit moving in opposite directions, given the way Philly went to their break, their bye week, and then the Packers coming off, I mean, by the odds makers, the worst loss that they've suffered since 1970, since they've been tracking this stuff. But I think you and I would say most NFL media at least believe the Packers and the Eagles are going to be there when it matters at the end of the season. What is keyed the resurgence of this Eagles offense, I think, in particular?
Yeah, I think over the last two games where Jalen Hurts has put together, I think two of the most complete performances I've seen from his career in the regular season against Minnesota and against New York. They've been going a lot more under center. Kevin Patullo is starting to get into a rhythm as a new play caller, kind of finding this offense's identity under center, play action, utilizing heavier personnel up front with 6 offensive linemen. It really seems like it's helped ignite both the passing game vertically and the run game. And that's not normally something the Eagles have done with Jalen Hurts as a quarterback. He's more comfortable in the shotgun, but I really do think it's kind of revived both areas of their offense over the last 2 weeks. And I would expect that will continue against the Green Bay Packers, even with A.J. Brown coming back. I just think that is really allowing them to be multiple and balanced right now, which they were not through the first 6 games of the season when they were 4-2.
It feels like the more mature approach to me, like an evolution of this offense, because early on they were so RPO heavy, so reliant on being able to run zone read and kind of a version of a college offense, and using Jalen Hurts' legs. It was such a benefit. Mm-hmm. But as teams have gotten onto that, it seems like the Eagles want Jalen to run a little bit less out in space, unless he's a scrambler, like fewer designed runs. And so if you're going to do that and not attack the middle of the field, which Jalen doesn't love to do anyway, the intermediate part of the field, which Jalen kind of doesn't want to do anyway, it seems like this is such an obvious way to get there.
Right. And
it has required an evolution of the scheme, right? Like Kevin Patullo has had to make changes here. And it seems like every year, you and I love, and me in particular, love to sort of make fun of Nick Sirianni about what do you do here exactly? But they've been able to find some of these different things, like, hey, let's try something else. We know we can get to these big A.J. Brown go balls and Devontae Smith posts, and Jalen Hurts is such an accurate deep ball thrower despite not having the strongest arm, that this seems like an evolution that, I'll be honest, like not every team would say, we're going to fundamentally alter the way that we play offense to try and get a spark here. And they've done that. I think they deserve a lot of credit for that.
That is one thing that Nick Sirianni does really well, is he doesn't really he's not stubborn in his laurels and his philosophies. Yeah. And that's something that last year also allowed them to go.
Philosophy. He's not the play
Maybe
call.
That's part of it, but I mean,
I think that, and I say that tongue in cheek, but I think that matters because it's not his offense. It's not his baby. So he doesn't have to be precious about, no, we have to run this way.
Yeah, I think the open-mindedness, the self-awareness of this organization from top to bottom is really a strength that people don't talk about enough. Like even Howie Roseman, I feel like, as the general manager, constantly changes his roster building philosophies. Nick Sirianni as well. Like last year when they were 2-2, they were throwing the ball a lot, and then they were the most run-heavy team in football and helped them win a championship. So this year as well, they are kind of changing on the fly, and that's something that a lot of teams, a lot of coaches, I don't think would be willing to do. So it is a necessary evolution. I am somebody that I do like when a coach plays to the strengths of his personnel, right? But eventually, like you said, teams have you figured out. They have what Jalen Hurts does best figured out. You do have to also force your players to evolve at some point. And I do think that Jalen Hurts looks really comfortable under center over the last 2 games. Again, he had a perfect passer rating against Minnesota, and I thought against the Giants, that was the most complete performance he's had all year. So Jalen's evolving with it, and I again, like I said, I think Monday night against Green Bay, you should expect more of that coming out of the bye week.
I think that if the Packers don't, they're making a mistake. I think that there's just like no way around that. The other side of the ball, and we're going to dig into these matchups, guys, don't worry. But the thing that has surprised me, Lou, is this defense just doesn't look the same, and they can't bring hockey waves of pass rushers at you the way that they used to be able to. That's why you go out and you get Jalen Phillips. I know Nolan Smith has been dinged up, Jalen Carter in and out of the lineup, whether it's for injury or spitting on people. There's been some issues there. Yeah. But that cornerback 2 spot, they're making some, again, they're not afraid to make some big changes. Is the Cooper DeJean outside corner thing here to stay? Is that the plan?
I think that's one of the ideas, but I do think Howie Roseman just said, here, Vic Fangio, you're maybe the best defensive mind in football. Here's a bunch of options. Go figure it out. I think Jair Alexander coming in, though, gives them some optionality with DeJean maybe still staying in the slot. And I know Alexander in Green Bay, and he didn't play much in Baltimore, but a lot of the time he was playing inside. But I do think
in Baltimore when he was playing.
Yeah, it wasn't good. But unlike Michael Carter, I do think he has a little more inside-out versatility. And with Jacorian Bennett coming off injury as well, injured reserve, they might still try to make it work with DeJean in the slot, but bringing in both Carter and Alexander does give you a lot more slot experience that, DeJean, at least for 2025, could play on the boundary. Now, I don't want that for him long-term. I don't think it fits the player the best, but I think for the team, that's probably the best combination of players you could have out there is DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell on the outside, and then Carter or Alexander in the slot. So, again, they kind of had to do that. That was the last shoe to drop, the last hole in this roster. I said this could really hurt them in a playoff game. Having an Adoree Jackson or a Keely Ringo out there. They don't have Darius Slay this season. That could have been the Achilles heel that maybe cost them in a crucial moment. And now, not saying that they fixed it and brought in like another Darius Slay type of player, but there's more options. And that's what I always respect about Howie Roseman is that he doesn't really sit on his hands like some other GMs.
Yeah, Packer fans are going to take that as a shot against Brian Gutekunst, so that's okay.
I was actually doing more of a dig at Brandon Bean, who yelled at my brother for daring that suggests that they make moves.
That's right. That was your
brother. So, yes, that was a dig at
no.
the AFC.
Oh, no. All right, we accept the dig at the AFC. No,
you
can't really say that about Brian Gutekunst anymore, right? Because he went out and he made the Micah Parsons trade.
Right.
And this is a team that Micah has had success over the years against. He and Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata are no stranger to one another. And those are heavyweight fights every time. And so he's coming off his least productive game as a pro. I expect a revitalized, a refocused Micah Parsons. He's just too good a player to not, like the 3-sack game the other week. He's just too good to be kept down for any length of time.
Right.
The other side here is interesting to me too, because the Packers have been seeing a lot more two shell. Early in the year, it was single high, and the Packers were like, okay, we're going to throw it over your head if you're going to play single high. Jordan Love had the highest 8 out in the league. He had an 8 out over 12, I think, through 2 weeks, which is just like bananas.
That's ridiculous.
And that was never going to be a thing that you could sustain over the course of a whole season. But this is the kind of defense that's going to do the same thing. They're going to put a lid on everything and make you drop everything underneath. That's just the reality of the way that they want to play defense. Why has it looked so different, though, this year?
I think for the Eagles, again, it's personnel change, right? I don't think they can always do the same things. Now that they don't, for instance, at cornerback, they don't have a Darius Slay, they've had to use some more man coverage where Quinyon Mitchell is shadowing top receivers. He's done that a lot more. Like you've seen him travel with Emeka Egbuka, Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua when they played Los Angeles, like Cortland Sutton when they played the Denver Broncos. That's been something consistently that they're doing with Quinyon Mitchell. And again, I think it's
overall, this week. The Packers don't have a guy like that.
See, that's the thing. It's been normally when they're playing an offense that has one truly elite playmaker, or at least one guy they're going to force feed. Like a Malik Neighbors before he got hurt with the Giants. There's not another true number 2 there to worry about, right? No. So I think Fangio, again, he has a clear philosophy and scheme that's been set in stone for a long time. But I also do think he's really good at adjusting on the fly based on the strengths of his personnel. And this year's defense is young and it's a lot of inexperienced players. So I think that's why it's kind of had to change. And also, Peter, it's too, their front four isn't hitting home as much as it has in years past, as you alluded to earlier. The reason they had to bring in Jalen Phillips, they've had to bring in more blitzes, like using Zach Bond and Jahad Campbell as pass rushers. So they haven't been able to, I think, play exactly the same way as last year, and that's part of why Howie did what he did last week.
All right, a lot more here as we come through Locked On Packers, Locked On Eagles, a crossover Thursday. Let's dig into some of these matchups next. Today's crossover Thursday brought to you by our friends at Mizzen in Maine. You know the saying, look good, feel good? The problem is that most dress clothes only check one of those boxes. They look sharp, but they feel stiff, hot, high maintenance. That's why we have Mizzen and Maine. Mizzen and Maine makes classic menswear with performance fabrics, so it's effortless to look sharp and feel comfortable. They actually invented the performance fabric dress shirt over 10 years ago, and they've perfected it since. I love that you can go from the office to dinner or even out on the golf course and still feel comfortable all day. It's got the feel of athletic wear, but the look of professional menswear. Right now, Mizzen and Maine is offering our listeners 20% off your first purchase at mizzenandmaine.com with the promo code LOCKEDONNFL20. That's Mizzen, spelled M-I-Z-Z-E-N, and Maine, M-A-I-N.com. Promo code LOCKEDONNFL20 for 20% off. If you'd rather shop in person, you can find Mizzen and Maine stores in select states. Today's episode also brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NBA, the NFL, both. There's hockey, all kinds of cool stuff. If you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. Easy enough. It takes less than 60 seconds to make a lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates. So they also have one of my favorite things, this new stacks feature. It's a game changer. You can now pick more on Steph Curry's points, threes, and assists in the same lineup. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Locked On Packers, Locked On Eagles, a crossover Thursday. Louie DiBiase from Locked On Eagles, Peter Bukowski, Locked On Packers. And Lou, we started to talk about this defense and some of the differences there. I'm fascinated to see how the Packers want to attack here because they were not afraid to try and push the ball against the Eagles in either of the matchups last year. Now, they took the underneath stuff, but they were willing to say, we're going to attack your safeties. We're going to make you have to get to Jordan Love. That's been the thing this year. When you blitz Jordan Love, he's been the best QB in the NFL by EPA, by any of the numbers you want to look at. But when you can get home with 4, that's been the key. So do you think we're going to see Vic Fangio trust that? You know, the very traditional Vic Fangio is like, early downs, I'm going to trust my front. And on third down, I'm going to bring weird stuff. Is that the plan, you think, this week?
I think that'll be the plan early on. We'll see again what happens. I do think with Nolan Smith activated from injured reserve, Jalen Phillips in the mix. Remember, too, Brandon Graham unretiring. He'll be making his debut. Yeah. They're a lot deeper on their defensive line.
But how many snaps are you really going to get from Smith and Graham, like right off
Probably
injury,
not,
right off retirement? By the way.
I don't think they're going to carry the load. But when you add those guys to a rotation already that has Jalix Hunt, who's had, I think, the 2 best games of his career back-to-back against Minnesota and New York. He was the best defensive player out there. Yeah. Jalen Carter's finally getting his legs under him, getting a little bit more healthy, more in condition. Josh Uche's actually been a pretty underrated free agent signing of Howie Roseman this year. Suddenly, again, Nolan Smith, Brandon Graham, they're not going to be able to carry the load this week against Green Bay, but you do have 5 available edge rushers now that you did not have against the Giants. So I think they're hoping the 4-man rush can allow Fangio to do what they do best on defense. But again, we'll see how that adjustment happens during the game, because normally this year they've had to bring in extra pressure through linebackers, through, different creative ways of even Cooper DeJean blitzing in the slot. So I don't know. I think it's kind of a wait and see approach, but I do think with Tucker Kraft not being in this game as well, the Eagles might, we'll see what the approach is, but I wonder if they'll dare them to beat them over top and with weapons kind of getting beat up with the Packers. So I am curious to see what Fangio does here with new personnel and with injuries on Green Bay side.
The MO the last couple of weeks has been, we're gonna try and change the picture on you. Yeah. And we're gonna play too high. And we saw the Panthers get Jordan Love a couple times with some, hey, it looks like quarters, but it's actually cover 6. And if you think you're going to beat us over the top, we've got a safety waiting on that deep over route or whatever it is. I don't see why Fangio would change anything in terms of that too high stuff. You're just going to dare the Packers to make a mistake, I think is what it is. Like they've had pre-snap penalties. They can't get lined up at times. The holding calls, the offensive line has been in flux. It sounds like Aaron Banks is going to come back this week. He had a stinger last week. That gives them the offensive line that has allowed this offense to look its best when it has looked its best. If you give Jordan Love time, Jordan Love from a clean pocket has been the best quarterback in the NFL this year. So if you've got time, that's a big deal. What I can't figure out is, I know Milton Williams is an impressive penetrator and you lost some pass rush there in Philly, but this defense right now 26th against the run in DVOA. Like that is not something I know they play a lot of too high coverage, but like those linebackers are good. Jihad Campbell can fly around. Zach Bond was an all-pro last year. I don't think his play has fallen off considerably this year. You've watched it closer than I have, Lou, but
yeah.
Why is the run defense been the issue that it has been? Because last year they were the best defense in the league, in part because you could not beat them over the top and you could not run them out of those too high looks.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Eagles have actually almost been built from back to front this year on defense, when normally it's front to back. Like the secondary, the passing defense has been the strength of that unit. I will say the run defense has been a lot better the last 2 games with the return of Nakobe Dean at linebacker. I think he's one of the more underrated run defenders. But I think a lot of it early on was Jalen Carter was injured.
You also no Cam Scadaboo in that game. And then
that's fair.
You're talking about a Vikings team that just has not run the ball well, like since Dalvin Cook was there.
That's fair, but I do think the Eagles normally are a pretty good run defense with this personnel, and I think a lot of it too was just they weren't deep enough on the edge. I think again at defensive tackle, Jalen Carter was beat up. So that to me is more what it was. I think tackling was also a problem. You bring in a lot of this new personnel. I expect that to get better overall. But I think interestingly enough too, Peter, like we talk about run versus pass approach for Green Bay. Christian Watson coming back, though, is an interesting name for me to watch. Yeah. I think, depending on what the Eagles do with Quinyon Mitchell, Watson the last 2 games, has showed that he can get back to being an explosive playmaker. Maybe not a high-volume receiver, but him against the Eagles secondary is what I'm very interested to watch. Because I think without Tucker Kraft, he's the most talented player. I'm like, what can he do in this game?
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think when I think about how you're going to replace Tucker Kraft, you go back to 2023 when they lost Luke Musgrave, and it's easy to forget now. Luke Musgrave was the no doubt day 1 starter in 2023 when both of those guys were drafted, and they were so excited about the things that they could do vertically with him. You lose Tucker Kraft. Think about this: the last drive, the Packers need to score a touchdown against the Panthers, and I understand they need to score touchdowns against the Panthers. They lose that game, but they score on that drive that starts with a big sail route from Luke Musgrave, and he gets 2 more targets on that drive. Like, he's going to walk into target share on this team. They know how to use him already. It's not like they're having to fit in some undrafted free agent or they signed Mercedes Lewis off the scrap heap. Like, that's not what this is going to be. But to your point, that 2023 season in the second half, they were using, that was when quarters was like everyone was trying to be Vic Fangio. It's Brandon Staley. It's Joe Barry. The less said about that, the better. They were using Christian Watson to attack vertically and to attack quarters over the top. We don't have to get back into that discussion that was on Twitter last week, but you can attack quarters defenses, especially by running that slot receiver. That's that number 2 or number 3 to a side. The Packers love to attack quarters with 3x1 and even 4 to a side. Christian Watson deep is that guy. And you're right. Like, the 53-yarder is against quarters, and you're able to beat that over the top. They love to run that dagger concept where you get that dig and that big over or post. They're going to get to that a lot of different ways. And so can you hold up protection wise? We saw Jordan Love in that Brazil game get to some of those plays, those big middle of the field, like deep digs and those kinds of things, because they had deep receivers. Against the Eagles in the playoff game, you lose Watson, you lose Dobbs, you lose Reed. Then it's Malik Heath and Dontavian Wicks, and you just don't have any juice. Tucker Kraft's a really good player, but he's not going to be able to stretch the field the same way. It's just not what he does. And so I think it creates a very different dynamic this time around, Lou. And if you can run the ball effectively, the Packers have been one of the best play action offenses in the NFL this year. And so it's going to be a tough job for those linebackers. They play really disciplined. I'm really impressed by them generally. the linebackers will just like you'll play action fake them and they just won't move. like they're like, we know what this is. We know what this is. We know what you're trying to do. So that cat and mouse game, I think, is going to be really important here. And can Jordan Love stay patient, right? Can he avoid the mistakes? I know he threw 3 picks in the playoff game, but like Malik Heath ran that deep in 5 yards off his landmark. And one was Darius Slade takes the ball away from Dontavian Wicks on the go route when he stacks the receiver instead of the receiver stacking the corner. And then the Bull Mountain one, that's a heave at the end of the game when you're trying to come back. It was also DPI, but like at that point, it doesn't matter. That was just a heave. So I don't think, you have to worry about Jordan Love making a bunch of crazy decisions. What's interesting to me, and this is the thing that I'm going to have my eye on the most without preempting my keys to victory too much here, Lou. The number 1 team this year offensively, and it looks better the last couple of weeks, going 3 and out has been the Eagles. When the offense doesn't click, it looks ugly. And so if they're going to go 3 and out a couple times, you're getting out of the let's shorten the game. Like the Packers had 7 possessions last week, man. Like you're just like, you're introducing so much variance when you do that. They got into the red zone 5 times and went 1 of 5, like turned the ball over on downs, fumbled, missed a field goal. You just can't have that stuff happen against the Eagles.
I think we'll talk about that in the third segment too, because I think an early lead is really important for both teams because of what you were saying with the Eagles and their issues with 3 and outs, with Jordan Love too. You hope he doesn't make mistakes in this football game. I think starting hot's going to be a key for both.
And I've never heard a coach say we'd like to start slow, but
of course,
I think to your point, like both of these teams would like to play from ahead. I think that gives both of them the opportunity to play the way that they want to play, and dictating those terms is going to be essential. Let's get into those keys to victory here on a Locked On Packers, Locked On Eagles crossover Thursday. This crossover Thursday brought to you by our friends at Gametime. The NFL season is back. It's so back. And there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. And let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why you got to use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Gametime is fast, it's easy, and it's backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. All fees included, so the price you see is the price you pay. You can get in right now. Packers, Eagles, there are tickets available. Are they cheap overall? No, this is a huge game, but there are good seats available right now at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. All right, Locked On Packers, Locked On Eagles, a crossover Thursday. If the Eagles are going to win, Lou, it's going to be because of what?
I think for me, it's getting an early lead and continuing to win the turnover battle. Jalen Hurts this year has the best touchdown interception ratio. He's on pace for, actually, at this point, over 40 total touchdowns passing and rushing, and only a few interceptions, which is really unbelievable. Even though he's had, the first 6 games were pretty inconsistent. I think being able to keep this team not playing with really bad field position has been really important. So against the Green Bay Packers, one of the top 4 teams in the NFC, I think it's, again, these two, and then you could probably argue like LA or Tampa Bay or Detroit, whoever else you want to throw in there. Like, this is the cream of the crop in the NFC, and it's a super important game. I think getting an early lead and not losing the turnover battle like they did. I mean, you look at that first game against the Packers last year in the opener in Brazil, when McKinney and Alexander had interceptions. Yep. The Eagles kind of had to play a little bit of catch-up there in the first half. So I think that was part of what changed Jalen Hurts' overall approach. I know it sounds cliche, but getting a lead and winning the turnover battle, it's been so key for the Eagles and their success over the last couple of years. This team just plays so much better from up top when they have a lead and they can just run down your throat in the second half. And I just think when they have to play from behind and they have to be a high-volume passing offense, sometimes they'll have big games like the last couple weeks, but I don't think that's their true identity of who they are. And so they've been a great first quarter offense. That's the one thing Kevin Patullo's done really well this year consistently is start fast. I think that needs to be a key again on Monday night.
Yeah, and this Packers defense has been outstanding in the first quarter. I think they've allowed one first quarter touchdown this season.
Wow. So yeah, strength on strength there.
And so
wow.
yeah, no question about it. And you know, like I joke about no coach has ever said I want us to start slow.
Right.
But some teams are just better than others at actually, you know, following through on that. I feel a little bit like you know, a dope because every week I come on Locked On Packers and I say the Packers can't turn the ball over. And that's the key. And it's just like, there's a reason that every coach in every locker room from time immemorial has said, we have to protect the ball.
Right.
And this is a Packers team that has the fewest giveaways in the NFL this season. That might seem crazy, but that's true. Given some of the high variance throws that Jordan Love is willing to make. They had the giveaways last week, and that was the key. They could not generate the takeaways, and they had 2 giveaways, one of them in the red zone. Like, you just can't make those mistakes. This is going to be a game where Jordan Love is going to have to stay patient, and they're going to have to be judicious with the way that they're going to take shots down the field. It has to be, you can't just like, don't go broke taking a profit. If they're going to play too high and you're going to have the run game working, keep running the ball. One of the reasons why the Packers are the best third down team in the NFL this year is because they have the shortest distance to go on third down this season. They are consistently in these like 3rd and 4s, 3rd and 3s, 3rd and 5s. It's like not quite 3rd and short all the time. They don't have an explosive pass or running game, and that's the problem. But they'll regularly get you 3-4 yards. And if you like, even if you run, which I hate, but like, let's say you do that.
Same.
It's consistently like 3rd and 3. And so that makes life easier for you. Jordan Love, one of the reasons why he doesn't have crazy touchdown numbers. One of the reasons why he's the EPA king right now in the NFL is because all they do is convert third down. They were 7 of 13 last week. Like, if you look at the underlying numbers last week, 5 trips to the red zone. They don't punt. They're 7 of 13 on third down. They win the time of possession battle and they lose the game. Like, that stuff is just, that's crazy. That's not going to happen. I'd like to see the Packers be a little bit more aggressive on early downs, throwing the ball, getting to their play action game. It's where they're really good. And I do think they have an advantage in this game in that you mentioned Quinyon Mitchell. I think against corners like that, where you can't play favorites, I think sometimes that has a defense going like, well, this is one of our best things where we can just put Quinyon on your guy and then you got to figure something else out. Well, the Packers have an egalitarian style of offense to start with. And so then what is the counter? They're not going to be afraid to throw at Quinyon Mitchell. Sometimes I wish Jordan Love would not trust Romeo Doubs against those guys. Like, he trusted Romeo Doubs against JC Horn a couple of times last week. And I'm like, can you not like try and find somewhere else? But there were also times when I felt like Aaron Rodgers, Mike McCarthy, like they were too afraid of Richard Sherman. They were too afraid of Darrelle Revis. And so the Packers have to find that balance in this game.
Yeah, that's a good point. Quinyon Mitchell, by the way, this year, I mean, throwing at him, though, has not worked out.
No.
The 3rd most snaps that he's allowed less than 1 yard of separation. Sauce Gardner, only one of 2 guys ahead of him. So, I mean, yeah, overall, I think a lot of this comes down to, too, I mean, both rosters are so talented. I don't think this is going to be a blowout on either end. It's the fourth quarter. I mean, I think both games against these 2 teams last year came down to who's more buttoned up in the fourth quarter, and that's something the Eagles are really good at. So I think overall this is going to be a fun battle, a chess match of 2 teams that have seen, like Peter, we talked about earlier, we feel like we've done the show together 1,000 times because they've seen each other a lot. And so I am curious how this game, the game plan will differ from last year's 2 matchups. So I'm excited about that.
There's plenty of film for both of these coaches to go over.
Yeah.
And I think that also makes this interesting. Matt LaFleur has been really, really good against opponents that he gets to see a lot. You see a team a second time like last year. Or 2023 is a great example. Like they get blown out by the Vikings and the Lions, and they come out in the second half of the season and blow those teams back out. And so it's just like they are good when they get multiple opportunities. Jordan Love at a players' dinner after the game on Sunday, already talking about revenge games. Like the Packers want this game. I expect them to show up. I expect this game to be close. And I know it's like, after seeing the Packers against the Panthers, it's weird that FanDuel has installed them as 2.5-point favorites. But like, I think if this game were in Philly, the Eagles would be 2.5-point favorites. Like, I think that's a fair That's a fair way to look at this.
That's why this game's so important too, Peter, because the 1 seed, I think, for both of these teams is crucial. Playing in Lambeau in January or at the Link, like those are two of the hardest places to play in the playoffs. So the Eagles have already gotten wins over the Rams and Buccaneers, who you'll be competing for that top seed. They play Green Bay and Detroit these next 2 games. Like this is a big opportunity for both sides in that way as well.
And the Packers already have the win over Detroit. So,
so
that's
the head-to-heads are huge.
Big thing. There's going to be another game against Detroit. This is really their last NFC team that they have to take down that they haven't already beaten, right? Like they don't play the Bucs, they don't play the Rams, and so this is kind of their last chance. I can't forget about the Seahawks, by the way, who are playing awesome football.
True.
And so this is I can't wait for this game. I think this game is going to be a classic, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think the Packers are going to win. I'm sure you think the Eagles are going to win, and that's great. I genuinely think we are going to be sitting here in January doing this again, Lou. And I can't wait to do it with you.
Probably.
Subscribe, Locked On Packers, Locked On Eagles, wherever you get podcasts on YouTube. We'll be live after the game, the squad shows, all that great post-game coverage. We'll be here for you all week. And then, of course, on Monday night after the game. So, as always, stay locked on Packers and Locked On Eagles.